This week on Cinemaholics, Sony has released their latest spider-themed adventure. This time it's animated, and this time our web-swinging hero is not Peter Parker, but instead Miles Morales.
So this movie was really kind of made for me in a way.
Later in the show, you'll also hear reviews for The Mortal Engines.
But no, I think I was more excited for this film than you were.
The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 2. They're 4 of my favorite episodes of any series ever. And you'll hear some of our early reactions to Aquaman.
I think they knew that this might be the only Aquaman movie we're ever going to get.
All that and more is coming up, so sit back, relax, and pour one out for your friendly neighborhood Cinemaholics. Welcome once again to Cinemaholics. He is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and he also reviews films for The Playlist, Cut Print Film, and more. It is Will Ashton.
Hello.
And I am the author of the novel Killer Joy, a book about Pixar called The Pixar Theory, and I occasionally write about culture and film for Relevant Magazine. I am John Negroni. He is our sound producer, as well as a far more casual moviegoer than Will and myself, and believe us when we say that is a compliment. It is Maverick Hines.
Hello.
And joining us for our featured review this week, we have a special guest, Will Ashton. Why don't you do the honors and introduce our fourth chair?
Sure. He is my co-host on my podcast, Ain't Ogre Toots Ogre, and one of my best friends in the whole wide world, and one of the biggest, most purest Spider-Man fans I know. It's Matt Serafini.
Hello. That's a stunning introduction, Will. Thank you.
Sure thing, Matt.
Looking forward to gauging Matt's Spider-Man knowledge later in this episode. But for now, you can find more episodes of Cinemaholics on AdamTickets.com, and you can support our show by becoming one of our patrons on patreon.com/Cinemaholics. And also, exclusively for our patrons, Maverick and Will, I don't even know if you know the full rules that we're doing for this yet. All you have to do to win our holiday-themed giveaway this year is guess our top 10 lists. So we're each going to have a list of top 10 films that's going to be coming out later in the month. And so we're putting out to our patrons who is going to get the closest to what our picks are going to be. So whoever wins is going to receive a Blu-ray or digital release of their choice. Be sure to check out our posting on Patreon for more details. And again, this is a giveaway just for our monthly patrons, and you can find all that at patreon.com/Cinemaholics. I'm very curious to hear what everyone guesses. I actually put out a list yesterday that was a bit of a red herring with my fake top 10 list.
Oh, I liked that.
It caused quite a stir. I don't think that was a wise decision because a lot of people took it seriously and they found solidarity with me in some dishonest ways. So I apologize to anyone who's disenfranchised by that list.
My name is Peter Parker. I'm pretty sure you know the rest. I saved the city, fell in love, then I saved the city again and again and again. Look, I'm a comic book, a cereal, I did a Christmas album, and a so-so popsicle. But this isn't about me. Not anymore.
Spider-Man swings in once a day, zip-zap-zop in his little mask and answers to no one. I love you, Miles.
Yeah, I know that.
You gotta say I love you back.
Dad, are you serious?
I want to hear it.
Look at this place.
Dad, I love you.
Dad, I love you.
That's a copy.
Will Ashton, what is our featured review this week, and what format were you able to see it in?
Yeah, our main review for this week is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is the new animated Sony film, which is, in some people's view, yet another Spider-Man film, but I don't think that's how we're going to feel about it. It is from 3 directors, I believe. Bob Persichetti, is that how you pronounce his name?
I think it is, so we apologize, but yeah.
Yeah, he did, Peter Ramsey, the second director, did Rise of the Guardians.
Rise of the Guardians, yes, the 2012 animated film that probably should have won Best Animated Film that year at the Oscars, in my opinion.
And then I think Rodney Rothman was also director on this film, if I'm not mistaken.
He was, yes.
Yeah.
And he's been known not just as director and a producer, he's also been a screenwriter in the past, and he's produced a few films.
And I guess what seems weird about this is that most people look at it as a Phil Lord and Chris Miller film, which is understandable since they produced it and Phil Lord is involved with the screenplay, but it's not them directing. So if there's any confusion about that, let that confusion go out the door.
Right. To be specific, Phil Lord, like you said, co-wrote the film with Rodney Rothman, who, we did mention this, he's also an author, and Phil Lord has a story credit on this. So apparently, yes, he did come up with the story, and since Christopher Miller, his partner, is a producer on it, you can kind of imagine that their hands are all over this from the get-go.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a Phil Lord and Chris Miller production. So
no offense to Peter Ramsey and Bob Persichetti, they should get due credit for directing this film, but Yeah, it's just,
Yeah, I saw it in a regular film presentation, not Dolby or anything. Forgot to mention that earlier.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah, I saw it in a regular film presentation as well, but I know Maverick Hines, you saw it in the Dolby, correct?
I did see it in Dolby.
Okay.
I refused to see it in 3D because the 3D glasses give me a headache.
I think this is one of those movies, though, that kind of forces you to watch it in 3D, whether you wanted to or not, based on some of the
I found the loophole and I exercised that right.
Let's go through the cast real quick, and then we're going to review this film. So the cast includes Shameik Moore, who you might remember from Dope a couple of years ago. He was also in that Netflix show that was a bit short-lived, The Get Down.
Oh, love that show.
Baz Luhrmann's, yeah. So he voices Miles Morales, the main character. You also have a couple of characters who voice all of the Spider people in this film. There's Jake Johnson, there's Haley Steinfeld, who plays Spider-Gwen, or Spider-Woman, as she's called in the film. Mahershala Ali, Brian Tyree Henry, Lily Tomlin, Luna Lauren Velez, John Mulaney, Kimiko Glenn, Nicolas Cage, and Liev Schreiber. So quite a cast, and to get into the plot and the synopsis, Matt Serafini, we want to hear your thoughts on the film, but how would you describe this film without getting into any spoilers for the uninitiated? What is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse about, and what did you think?
I guess Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is about Miles Morales, who's a young Afro-Latino kid living in Brooklyn, and it's about how he comes to be the new Spider-Man. I guess that's like the really nutshell version of it, right? Is that
yeah,
not
no
giving anything
interdimensions.
away. I love it.
Yeah.
and well, I guess to add a little more detail, it involves some Spider-Men and women from other universes coming into the fray to help him learn what it takes, among other things. Well, I really, really, really liked this movie. I'm a really, really big fan of Spider-Man, as Will said at the top of the show. And I've been reading every Spider-Man comic ever for the past three and a half years. It's a major part of my life. I've seen all 6 other movies many times. I'm also a huge fan of animation. So this movie was really kind of made for me in a way. But that being said, I would say it also makes me harder to please. Like, John, I feel like you probably empathize with this, where you're a really big fan of Pixar, so you're probably going to like anything they do. But you're also a little harder to please than most people in terms of like for it being absolutely perfect.
I'm just hard to please with everything, Matt.
That's fair. But in any case, this movie passed the tests, and it really is something really special. It is literally like jumping into a comic book and seeing everything coming to life. The art style is just immaculate. I saw somebody say when they walked out of the theater, they said, this is probably what it was like to walk out of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That might be a bit of a exaggeration, but I mean, I think the idea is there. Yeah, I really, really like this movie. It does so well with everything about Spider-Man. It's everything I love about the character boiled down in a nice format. Yeah, I don't know. How about you guys? Like,
we just want you to do the entire review, though. So
the entire review, just me.
we didn't mention this, but this is actually a Sony production. This comes from Sony Pictures, and Sony ImageWorks did the animation, which means this is part of Columbia. And Marvel Entertainment is one of the production companies that helped this, along with Lord Miller Productions. So it is kind of interesting because Sony has had not the greatest track record with Spider-Man films in the last decade. I think just a couple of months ago, they put out my least favorite film of 2018, which is Venom. And so it is interesting. This is a bit of a surprise in a lot of different ways, and that's certainly one of them for me. Maverick Hines, you saw this one pretty fresh.
Saw it last night.
Just saw it last night, and you saw this one with your wife. What did you both think of Into the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, well, I'll start with what she told me, which is, I love this movie. And that's about as analytical as that conversation got with her.
I love the detail that she gets into.
Yeah, I mean, she's a wizard, man. But no, for real, we both really had a great time with that. I will say that we benefited like so greatly from seeing it in Dolby. That was such a cool experience. The sound was unreal. Like, I mean, that was probably the best Dolby viewing experience I've had yet. Granted, I've only had like 5 or 6. It's not a huge.
Better than Night School.
I didn't see Night School, so
I did in Dolby. I just had to remind.
You saw Night School in Dolby?
Why not?
That's great.
What?
A-list, baby.
That's right. You've got the A-list. You don't scrim.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was distractingly weird. So she had a really good time. She liked it. We talked about it all the car ride home. I really like this. I'm not near the Spider-Man fan as our fourth chair friend here, Matt, today. But, I do like Spider-Man. I like Spider-Man movies. I haven't seen a lot of the, let's see, is it Garfield? Is that the guy who
Andrew
played?
Garfield.
I haven't seen any of
Spider-Man.
I haven't seen any of
Garfield.
those ones.
The animated lasagna loving cat. That's Spider-Man.
Yeah. I really love this. It was visually fantastic. I think this is when I saw like the here's a quick look at the movie at the end of what movie was it that we saw?
Venom.
Okay,
Yeah.
at the end of that, I was like, man, I'm kind of worried about this. I don't know if they just picked the wrong one for that or what, but I was like, I don't know if I like this. And the little clips that I've seen in trailers and stuff, I was a little bit like, man, I don't know if I love that animation. But going through and sitting through the whole movie, I really loved it. I thought it was fantastic, really cool to see. I loved all the little comic book throw-ins with like inner monologues and stuff like that. I really had fun with that. I have to say, one of the best things about this movie, in my opinion, is the soundtrack was phenomenal. It kind of reminded me of like how perfectly fitting the Black Panther soundtrack was, the one that Kendrick Lamar kind of oversaw. This one was cool. It wasn't like a one artist doing the soundtrack with a bunch of features. It was like Jaden Smith, Post Malone. It's
on Apple Music right now. I've been tearing through it.
I listened to it on the way home last night. It's a really, really great soundtrack as far as like non-original score stuff goes. So yeah, the soundtrack was great, visually amazing. I really liked all of the different spider people that we got to meet. I thought the characters were cool. One thing that I don't know if people are going to share this thought, but this is probably one of my favorite portrayals of like the Kingpin villain. I really enjoyed that, and I think it had to do with the visual. I think it benefited greatly from the cartoonness.
I think this is our first area of disagreement.
Yeah,
I did not like this version of the Kingpin.
I loved the visual of like this big rectangle, like imposing, like evil guy. I
questioned the logistics of it, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that.
The biology is a little off for me.
Doors change shape often, but we don't have to worry about that part. But no, I really loved. I felt like the fact that it was kind of an animated cartoon thing really enhanced like the feeling of Kingpin, and I don't know why, but I was like thinking about it the whole time. I was like, man, I really like this Fisk. I thought he was really cool. And then the one like thing I think I'm gonna complain about, and I feel like I'm probably gonna get hate for this because I know how much you guys love John Mulaney, is I did not like the like cartoon Spider-Ham thing.
Oh, the heart of the movie.
I didn't. The humor.
What didn't you like about him?
The humor for all of his stuff it just felt really forced. I don't think I ever laughed at a joke that was supposed to be funny with him. Like the Spider-Ham thing just did not land for me. Though I will say that probably the funniest line in the movie for me did involve him, and it's when he does like the cheesy like "That's all, folks," and the other Spider-Man goes, "Is that legal? Can he say that?"
Yeah.
I laughed for like 15 minutes at that, but that wasn't really his joke, so I'm not giving him credit for it. But yeah, I don't know. That's probably like my one and only complaint is like the humor for the Spider-Ham thing. Every time he was kind of like, "Oh, hey, I'm here," it just felt forced to me, and it didn't land. But it's not enough to like hurt the overall grade of the movie because it was used so sparingly, and I'm great that they didn't try to like shove it down my throat. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't aggressive, but I don't know. It didn't do it for me. And I like Mulaney. I'm not saying I don't like Mulaney. John, listen to me. I do not say that I don't like John Mulaney. Please don't hurt me. But I did not like that character. I don't want to give anything away, but towards the end of the movie, I think the whole like leap of faith transition where the new Spider-Man kind of comes into his own, and we see that kind of little montage of him like learning, kind of fully expressing his new abilities. I thought was one of the coolest like expressions of that transition in a movie I've seen in a very long time. I think it was just expertly done. I thought it was cool, though things can happen quick in that kind of transition. It was one of the times where I was like, I don't care that he's kind of got it now. Like, I really enjoy this. The music was perfect. Him kind of going around the city and being like, this is who I am, his outfit, like everything about that entire like leap of faith transition point was perfect for me.
So we didn't really cover this, but yeah, part of the plot is that dimensions are colliding and all of these different spider people, we kind of mentioned that, kind of come in. And so yes, there's Spider-Ham, there's the Spider Noir character voiced by Nicolas Cage, there's a spider anime character, there's all kinds of these characters coming in. And I would say that, for me, I definitely really enjoyed this film. I thought that it was just a delight the entire way through. I actually really enjoyed the way that they wove those characters in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Even when those characters would come on and do their things, notably Gwen Stacy and the Peter Parker. I think he's Peter B. Parker.
Peter B. Parker.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's it.
wonderful characters with lots of pathos and their own backstories that are comedically conveyed. But the story always comes back to Miles Morales. And one of the things I really appreciate about the Miles Morales character is, seeing a character who I believe he's Black Puerto Rican. So seeing a character that I share roots with, I kind of had the realization during this film that I don't think I've seen any other Puerto Rican characters in any sort of big blockbuster film in 2018. And so I had a little bit of a moment of, it was very cool to see, somebody on screen that I can relate with in a very different way than I normally do. And so that was very great. And I have to say, I want to turn it over to Will Ashton. I would be hard-pressed to find somebody who can tell me convincingly that this is not the best animated film of 2018. And I think that you can make an argument that it's up there with Black Panther as the best superhero film, but I would question whether or not this is, to me, feels... we were talking about, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs being kind of a moment where it's like, ooh, this kind of changes things, right? For me, this film sort of changes comic book and animation films and what you can use with those two mediums, what you can produce with those two mediums put together. And it's exciting to see this movie because you see a lot of possibilities for future films, but also taking the idea of what a comic book is and why people love them and making films out of them that are essential and different in ways that you can't really do with live action films, even though those are good in their own right. So, Will Ashton, what about you? I mean, we're praising this film quite a lot. So, where are you at with this new Spider-Man film?
Yeah. Well, like Matt, I grew up, I think, a big fan of the character of Spider-Man. I didn't read nearly as many comics as Matt has, but yeah, there's just something about Spider-Man that kind of idealizes the nature of the fun of being a superhero. I think the same with Superman. There is something like just very whimsical and magical about the character of Spider-Man's like love of being a superhero, like just the fact that he has like so much fun and joy, and but at the same time this very intense need to be the superhero despite the odds that are presented against him. I can see why people might be a little tired of all the Spider-Man movies we've gotten in the last 2 decades, but I can only think of one Spider-Man movie where I was just like, I don't like this at all. Like even the weaker installments of the series, I'm like, I just have so much fun with this character. I just love him so much. At the same time, though, I don't know, even with the buzz coming into this film, I wasn't really sure if I was going to be like in love with this movie as much as other people. Maybe just because something about when movies get like very, very hyped, I get really nervous. I guess just because like I don't know if it can possibly live up to those stakes, and if you're like the one person who doesn't like the movie, it's kind of terrifying. But I will say, I mean, even as I get older, I don't know if you feel this way, John, like going to movies doesn't often have like the same magic. Like I'm still very much a fan of films, but I haven't had that like same whimsical factor as often as I get older. Like there's something that's kind of, the more you go to the movies, the more you kind of you're aware of your surroundings, I guess. I don't know if you feel this way or not. Like you're aware that you're sitting in a theater watching a projection on a screen, and you're just like, okay, this is a movie. Even if I really like it, I can feel that way. And it's very rare for me to feel like, oh, like I'm in a movie, like I'm in there as much these days. But I will say, like at least for 90 minutes of this movie, like I was completely, the theater was gone. Like I was in the movie. I was in it, and it made me like honestly feel like a kid again. Like it made me like, oh yeah, this is like what it was like to be a big fan of Spider-Man. And I really liked Homecoming as well, but like this is like, okay, this is what I like. And the only other time I think I had that feeling this year was, weirdly enough, or fittingly enough, Incredibles 2, where I was like, oh yeah, this is like why I loved going to movies as a kid, like to see these big expressive action movies. And I think that's a credit to the filmmakers who are able to use the animation or use the medium animation in a way that's fun. You know, it's clear the animators are having a blast, even though I can imagine this is a very difficult film to animate just based on the way it's presented and looked. But it's clear that they have a lot of fun. It's very lighthearted, very bouncy, but there is that grounded morality to it that keeps it emotionally, resonant. And I think that's quite a balance to not make jarring or anything like that. And I just think it's honestly pretty incredible. Like I don't know if I am even like as high as some people are about the film, but I can totally see why this movie is going to be one of the definitive Spider-Man movies of our time.
I think it very much will be. I think it's one of the best superhero films in the last decade. And part of the reason for that is because we see a lot of superhero films that don't do much to really tap into that emotion that you're talking about, the making you feel like a kid again. Beyond, there are moments that we can point to throughout the Marvel films that have gotten that here and there. I think the airport scene in Captain America Civil War is such a pure moment of heroic joy for those watching. It's so cathartic.
He might get mad at me, but the only other time I can think of that besides Incredibles 2 I felt this way was Captain Underpants.
I will not get mad at you ever for loving Captain Underpants. That is a genuine, that is innocence and full display.
But I think there's proof there, like between that Incredibles 2 and maybe Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that there's just something about animation and superheroes that just fit so well. Obviously, because it is an animated film or medium to begin with, but I just think even like compared to like the live action superhero movies that I love, this like there's something about animation that just makes it click. I don't know. I wish I could say that more prophetically, but yeah.
This was Spider-Man fully realized, like I thought.
Well, part of that I think is because so you do still have Peter Parker in this film. One of my favorite elements of Spider-Verse is that we get the adult Peter Parker, the one who's in his 30s, who's a bit washed up. His Mary Jane, who I think is voiced by Zoe Kravitz in this. Yeah. So we see, there's one of the lines in this film really crystallized it for me, where he's like, I saved the world, maybe a little too much. And it was one of those things where we were, it made me realize we're exploring the adult Spider-Man for the first time in cinematic history. It feels like we always seem to get the high school Spider-Man. We got to go back to when he was in high school with Andrew Garfield. Let's do it again with Tom Holland.
Let's do it one more time.
That's right. And I appreciated so much that Spider-Verse gave us, a brief version of the adult Spider-Man. Clearly, there's an appetite for that because that character is so fresh. This reminded me of the Spider-Man from the 80s and 90s from those comics. Because that was the Spider-Man that was in those stories, and it's taken a long time for the films to give it a chance on that sort of thing. And in fact, it made me wonder, too, if only we could have had like the Miles Morales be the live-action high school Spider-Man in the more recent films. But obviously, they were always going to go with the new Peter Parker for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so far, that's turned out pretty well. We don't have to talk about it, but I did manage to catch the Spider-Man Far From Home reactions to a trailer that none of us are able to see yet, and some of how that story is developing with Jake Gyllenhaal plays the villain in that film, Mysterio. And it just sort of... Yeah, I do love Jake Gyllenhaal, so it excites me that he is going to have a pretty strong presence in that film. He has a lot to live up to with Michael Keaton, who was a wonderful villain as the Vulture in Homecoming. But all of that to say, it is kind of fascinating to me, like you said, Will. There are so many Spider-Man films getting thrown at us, and yet at the end of this one, at that post-credit scene, which we will dare not give away because it is absolutely one of the best post-credit scenes we've gotten ever, for sure. I think, in my opinion. I found myself craving more Spider-Man films, and they did it. That's what a film studio wants. Obviously, the creators behind this wanted us to enjoy this, and I think I have not yet found anybody who really hates this film. Obviously, there's some contrarians out there who just aren't into it, but yeah, it's definitely it feels like universal acclaim is in the air for this animated film, and it's quite a surprise, and I'm super happy to see it. But let's go into our final thoughts and sum this thing up. Matt Serafini, you've listened to us kind of rave quite a bit. Did you have anything else to add to kind of sum up your thoughts on this, maybe in terms of the legacy of this film and how you see it playing with wide audiences? It's hitting its wide release this coming weekend as we speak. People are buying their tickets. We don't know if it's going to be a huge success, but maybe it will be.
Yeah, I'll just say, like this movie takes the context of Spider-Man and our greater culture, all the comics, all the memes, all the video games, TV shows, the previous 6 movies, and all the fans, and they contextualize it all by wrestling that legacy and show what it really truly means to be Spider-Man, and like anyone can wear that mask, and it's just such a good message of a movie in so many ways. It's really, like I said, it's really something special, and I hope everybody sees it. I hope it wins the Oscar. I love this movie if I haven't made it clear enough. And the credit sequence, without spoiling it, is a great look into my inner psyche.
I can see it being the background of one of your social media profiles for quite a while.
Yep, exactly. There's so much more to say, but just go see it. That's my final thing, I think. Go see it.
What was your final grade?
I'm going to give it an A.
Not even an A+, Matt?
Well, I know A+s are rare to hand out. For me, it's an A+.
Oh,
that's
talked him. You upsold him on the A+. Rule. You should work at the movie theater.
I guess so. I do work at the movie theater.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, you want the large popcorn, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Maverick Hines, what about your final grade?
I have to say, like I said before, I don't have the full sample size of all the Spider-Man movies, but this one, I feel like, in time might creep its way to my favorite Spider-Man movie list. I'm really liking it. It's an A for me as well. Not an A+. Sorry, Will. No sell here.
I love that line from the trailer where, and I think it's in the movie too, where the Jake Johnson Spider B Man or Peter B Parker, whatever it is, where he
Spider
says,
B Man.
I like it. Spider B Man.
Lord and Miller, call me up.
What does the B stand for?
Benjamin.
I see. Okay,
Yeah.
there you go, Matt.
I forget what the other one was. I think it was J or something like that. But for the Chris Pine Spider-Man. But yeah, so I love that line from the trailer where he says, "What makes you different makes you Spider-Man." And they did find a way to make Miles Morales his own Spider-Man, and they made the story about how there are so many Spider-Man movies. It's very meta, and that obviously
so
pleases
meta.
us. Because that's funny, and that kind of, we feel like we're in the hands of people who understand the material, and we're able to like sit back and relax and, take it seriously when we need to take it seriously, but also laugh at it or laugh with it, we should say, when it's trying to be funny, and it balances those tones almost pitch perfectly. So, and I do want to say too that I forgot to mention Catherine Hahn voices one of my favorite villains in this. Now I'm not going to give it away because I think for some people it might constitute as a spoiler. But the voice cast in this we should give a lot of props to. Some really great characters in here. Even some of the plot twists that you see coming in here in terms of like, oh, that character is going to be that character. You can see it coming if you're like Matt Serafini and you read a lot of the comics.
Actually, that caught me off guard.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was a good reveal.
All right. Well, we won't get into it, obviously, but so there you go. They got one past Matt Serafini, Spider-Man expert. So, so I have to give this one an A as well. I just think that it's a quintessential Spider-Man movie, and it's a quintessential superhero film. And Will Ashton, close us out. Tell us all about your B-.
I don't know if I have anything else to add that I haven't said already, but there are so many ways this movie could have been like exhausting or tiring just based on the meta humor, the kind of whiz bang buck animation style, the very like fast paced tone. But I think it's really a credit to the filmmakers that this movie is as consistently engaging as it is while not feeling like completely lighthearted. It's pretty miraculous considering that the film has like so many multi-universes and all that it's fairly simple at its heart. In a way that I guess some could see the message as being cheesy, and I think that's kind of a tribute to Spider-Man. That even I think there is something that's always going to be kind of cheesy about Spider-Man, but I think the movie is actually able to avoid like some of the pratfalls that have been found in other Spider-Man movies, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I think the only criticism I have is that I was starting to get a little checked out by the end, and it's not to say that I was like bored. I just was kind of like, okay, I think this is like kind of like I'm starting to realize I'm back in the movie theater again. His name is Shymeik Moore, right? The guy who plays Miles Morales from Dope. Yeah, he gives, I think, honestly, one of the best voice acting performances I've seen in a long time. He was really, truly tremendous, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next. So for me, I'm going to give it an A-.
All right. Well, that is an A average for all four of us. Go check it out, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. There's going to be a lot of films coming at you in December, a lot of big blockbusters, including this weekend, but next weekend as well. So I have a feeling Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is going to be our favorite compared to all of those other films. Don't want to make any reckless predictions, but I think that's probably going to be the case. Definitely a good one to take children to, since it is animated. But I also do think that adults and superhero fans are going to get a kick out of this, and it's in theaters now.
What is that? That is London.
60 minutes is all it took to bring humanity to the very brink of extinction. Mankind mobilized. A new age arose. The age of the great predator cities. Survival of the fastest.
All right, so The Mortal Engines. This one's based on a novel that was written by Philip Reeve, I want to say. And,
Did you read the novel?
I've never read the novel. No, have you?
Okay. I have not. No, I wasn't sure.
Okay, yeah. So, a lot of people have mentioned that. I think a lot of people have gotten it incorrect that Peter Jackson, of course, the Lord of the Rings director, the Hobbit director, he did not make this film. He did not direct The Mortal Engines. Mortal Engines was directed by, I believe, one of his, I don't want to call him one of his students, but like one of his right-hand men, Christian Rivers.
Yeah, I think he's one of his like AD people.
Done a lot of work for him in the past. And then, so Peter Jackson had a production credit on this. He was working on something else, I think, while Mortal Engines was being made. I think he was still
Hobbit?
Dealing with Hobbit. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I forget how recent those films were.
No, but I think he was like, well, I think it was not so much that he was busy with the Hobbit movies, but he was just so
Probably
like checked out by those.
Yeah.
That like he decided like I want to make another movie, but I just want to make this documentary, which we'll probably talk about in a week or two, called "They Shall Not Grow Old," which is a little more kind of mellow.
Which I see Monday.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see it Monday as well. But yeah, so I don't think it was so much that like the timelines were conflicting, but it was just like, I don't want to do another blockbuster. You can handle this. He
needed recovery for sure.
He wanted to get it made for sure, but he's like, I can't, like at this point, I cannot like have the energy to direct this. So you take it. Yeah.
I can sort of see probably his burnout nature with this too, because this is yet another post-apocalyptic film based on a novel that's mostly, I think, geared toward younger readers. I don't know if it's strictly YA, but Mortal Engines is a concept that does feel very sci-fi gimmicky. It is about, I think, 1,000 years in the future, 1,000 years after we destroyed each other in something called the 60-Minute War. We used, I think they're just purple gravity nuclear weapons. It is a little unclear like why they are worse than nuclear weapons, but apparently they were so bad that the entire world got decimated. We rebuilt it, and as you can imagine, we ran out of resources, and so big cities like London, which is our main location here, started to, I think they call it municipal Darwinism. They started to retrofit their cities into roving, marauding predator cities. And so you can see London rolling down a massive landscape, and then you can see the actual landscape itself is covered in tracks. Obviously, cities have been going around, and what they do is they find smaller cities, they ingest them, they put these hooks in them, and we see all of this in the opening sequence, which is, I think, where the film peaks. Honestly, it's a tremendous sequence where the Predator City of London is tracking down this small, tiny blip on the radar, and you can tell they're so desperate for resources, they go all out to get this small little town. And you sort of see that process and why they're doing it, what is the thinking behind these Predator cities, and the dilemma they sort of face, because obviously this is a game that is not going to last forever. Plots ensue, and the mastermind behind the marauding in this case is played by Hugo Weaving. He plays a character named Valentine. He's kind of our swashbuckling villain in this case. And we have a whole cast of characters, a wide range of characters, far more than I was expecting. It really feels like they decided to include a lot of the characters from the books. Normally in adaptations like this, you get the sense that they cut characters out because they just need, it's a film. They need to sort of streamline things. That is not the case in Mortal Engines, and I think quite to the film's detriment, because there is a lot going on in this. And I know, Will Ashton, you're very concerned for me, but this unfortunately is a sleeper. For me, this is a film that put me to sleep in the second act, because despite the goodwill from the first, once our main characters get on their main adventure, the two ones are Hester Shaw, played by Kira Hilmar, and Robert Sheehan plays Tom Natsworthy. Robert Sheehan, I remember him from Misfits, a wonderful BBC show that came out a few years ago. He was one of the main characters, and he bowed out, I think, in the second or third season. They're our main characters. They go on a crazy adventure that takes them outside of London, inexplicably, I think. And once we follow the machinations of that plot, I found this one quite difficult to get invested in. It was very hard for me to stay awake. Eventually, the third act shook me out of my complacency, and things started to get somewhat interesting again, only for everything to sort of come to a thudding halt by the end of this film. I did not care for Mortal Engines, Will Ashton, if you cannot tell. I think it is a bit of a slog, but what did you think?
Well, I am rather concerned about your recent narcolepsy, but that's another conversation, I guess, for another time. But no, I think I was more excited for this film than you were, mainly because I am such a big fan of Peter Jackson. I consider him one of my favorite filmmakers. Not so much for Lord of the Rings, but just in general, I think his films are a lot of fun. I think he clearly has a lot of fun making those films, and the only exception I could think of was the Hobbit films, where you could kind of tell that they were dragging on him and he wasn't putting his full heart into it. But as it stands, yeah, with Mortal Engines, I agree with you what you were saying at the beginning. Going into this film, there was like that slight chance. I didn't think it was going to happen, but there was that slight chance where it's like, okay, this could be Mad Max Fury Road for like teenagers or for like the PG-13 crowd. And
Absolutely.
I think, and Junkie XL did the score, and they had like that kind of like Tom Waits gargling intro, like in the beginning, the same kind of thing. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is going to be like that really cool type of thing again. But obviously, the opening's great, and I think it makes a great teaser, but unfortunately that's like the big set piece. That's like the main draw, and unfortunately the film, once that ends, I agree with you, it does kind of tunker out. But I think for me, though, it wasn't so much the second act that dragged for me, but I just was checked out by the third act. Once a certain character leaves, I can't give away who, but it's like that kind of seems like, I know it wasn't, but it was like, this kind of seems like the climax. And it's like, oh yeah, we got to deal with Hugo Weaving, and then that whole scene for me was just like, ugh, let this end. It's just so long and drawn out. That for me was like if I was gonna fall asleep at any point in the film, it would be that point, which is the climax, which is not good for your big action blockbuster. But no, I don't hate it. I think it has a lot of cool stuff going for it, but the story is just crucial here. I don't think it's a bad story, but the way it's written, it's very exposition heavy. Like characters just like, oh, don't you know that exposition. And then, yeah, it just very much like no one talks like the way they would in this world. It just feels like the movie's pandering to us. And I do like the world building, but as it stands, I don't think it's enough to make a solid film after like the 45-minute mark. So yeah, I'm pretty disappointed by it.
The world building is pretty great. The costume design, the look of these cities, you actually get the sense that this happened, that they sort of lead you to the conclusion that these cities exist and have like some kind of purpose, and it's something to watch. I mean, I almost would recommend the film just on, to film nuts who really want to sort of wonder behind like how these computer animators were able to put all of this together, because it is pretty fascinating. The problem, I think, go ahead.
And I was gonna say, it kind of reminded me of Jean Pierre Jeunet films, like City of Lost Children, I think it's called. Or I know he's most famous for Anomaly, but there's something about that was like, Amelie, I would really, So I would really love to like just be on the set, like a fly on the wall, like walking around, because I'm sure it looks gorgeous, like to walk around it and stuff. But yeah, unfortunately, I just wish the story was better. But sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, no, but I think it's to add on to that. I think it's the pacing and the editing here. You really got the sense that it was such a bold and audacious production that they didn't get all the good transitions and scenes that they needed, because there's so many weird cuts, and it really does feel like this thing was chopped up because they maybe didn't have quite the material, or they weren't able to make something, they weren't able to use trickery in certain places to make a scene work. So what ends up happening is you cut to scenes that don't make a lot of sense. There are some transitions that are jarring, and I think to what we were talking about with Spider-Verse, it kind of takes you out and you lose that immersion. You're reminded that you're in the theater and that you're watching somebody's handiwork. And that's not where you want to be with a story like this that doesn't have a strong enough script to keep you loving the dialogue and loving the interactions between these characters. There was a moment, because we mentioned Robert Sheehan's character, Tom Natsworthy, who I found a very strangely unlikable character.
Which one?
Tom, he starts as a historian, and he kind of wants to be a pilot.
Okay.
So we learn. Yes, you've already forgotten. We learned quite a bit about him, and in his interactions with Hester Shaw, you're supposed to want her to be invested in him the way that we're supposed to want to invest in him. But he's a very unlikable person. There's a scene that really crystallizes for me where she, we've gotten the message that Hester Shaw, she's a survivalist. She'll do anything to survive, and without any sort of thing happening between her and Tom where she wants him to be on his own. She doesn't want to have to look out for him. Out of nowhere, she gives him half of her Twinkie. And you're supposed to be like, oh, so there's humanity in this character, and she sees something in him. He doesn't even thank her. He complains about the Twinkie, grumbles about it, and eats it, and that's the end of the scene. And to me, that is an abysmal scene. It makes you hate this character, and it makes you wonder why Hester Shaw is so trusting of this very unpleasant person.
It's the most random product placement I've ever seen in the movie, too.
I think it's a funny joke to the post-apocalyptic, like Twinkies would survive. I think that kind of fits.
Well, speaking of yellow round or figures, I guess.
This was a Universal film, so yes.
Yeah, there are more minions in this movie than in Illumination's The Grinch, so prepare for that, I guess, accordingly.
Right. It's a blink and you'll miss it kind of thing, fortunately. But they play it for laughs, and it's like one of the few scenes where you do get the sense that, yeah, it's supposed to make you laugh. There are a lot of other scenes in here. I don't think they were ever trying to inject much humor into the proceedings, so it's very strange.
They're attempts, but they're not good.
Yeah, maybe the attempts were so misguided that I didn't even register that they were supposed to make me laugh. And then we didn't really mention much of the supporting cast. The only one that really comes to mind, and so you mentioned one of them. It's like a Terminator-esque
Strike. My favorite character in the whole movie.
Very interesting character. I did not like the way that they sort of finished that arc between him and a couple of the other characters. I thought it was a little unearned, honestly, but yeah, he was miles more interesting to me than a lot of these other characters, honestly.
The way he's introduced, I don't know if you noticed this, but a lot of Peter Jackson films, productions at least, you can tell 85% of special effects are like really good, but it's clear that there's like one or two scenes that are like, Tom, this is game time, crunch time. We got to finish this up. He's like, we're just finishing. We didn't even start. It's like, no, we got to do it now. And that's Shrike's introduction. The CG in that scene is so like some of the worst CG I've ever seen in a movie ever. I don't know if you feel that way, but
it was pretty terrible. Yes,
it was like, oh my, like they approved this. This is in the film. I mean, thankfully it got better a little bit, but I do like the character. I just wish the animation CG for him was even a little bit better.
Yeah, I didn't know if we said this was, of course, Stephen Lang, who I don't think we've seen much of since. We haven't seen much of him since I don't think Don't Breathe. From years ago. Unfortunate, because I think that he obviously can carry better material. Honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was almost Cable.
Yeah, that's right. Also, there is a pilot character who leads this sort of anti-traction league, I think it's called, a resistance group. Ji-Hai plays this character, and she sort of comes into the second act, and it sort of feels like a breath of fresh air, because clearly there's something about her that's going to like really move the plot along. It follows some pretty familiar beats of the characters getting in trouble, and then a group of misfits kind of takes them in and then propels them to what the third act is going to be. What was your take on this character? Do you think it kind of, for me, I don't know if it quite fit this world that we were in. So I had trouble kind of enjoying this part of the film and enjoying her group of people and what they offered.
Yeah, I thought she was a cool character. Like you said, though, I feel like if she was maybe introduced earlier into the film, or if they've given her like more time.
They sort of tease her. Yeah, they drop her name at one point, but that's about it.
Right. In a very clunky exposition, sort of, hey, don't forget foreshadowing. Okay, more exposition. It's a cool character. I thought the performance was good as well, but yeah, I just kind of wish she was either in a better film or they just gave her more to do, because it was a bit of a bummer just to see a kind of rote character, or a fairly rote formula for such a cool character.
Right. We've talked about Mortal Engines a bit longer than I think we expected we would.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm surprised we're still talking about this Mortal Engines movie.
I guess I'm just a little bit fascinated with how this all went down. I give this one a C plus. I'm not quite a C, just because I think that, again, world building here really works, and there is some really great effort in production design that I don't want to dismiss. And it like you said, it's not a terrible film. It just you're gonna have a hard time sticking with it all the way through, I think. What about you?
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think it's like a lot of really cool pieces, but they don't fit together like a puzzle, and it just doesn't quite work. It's a shame. It doesn't come together as well as it should have, and it's just the basics. Like, I think kind of like similar to how you were saying about Vox Lux a couple weeks ago. It's just story is crucial. I mean, if you don't have that foundation, no matter how much good is in this elsewhere, and I think I like the performances a little more than you did as far as our two leads. I thought they were pretty good. But yeah, just that story is just so by the books, formulaic, and that's not to dismiss a book. I can't speak about it one way or the other, but just the way it's presented in this film. Unfortunately, it was written by Peter Jackson and his wife, Fran Wallish. So I do like their script work elsewhere, but yeah, this story, the screenplay just doesn't live up to what is so good about the film elsewhere, and that's a shame. I'm pretty disappointed, truth be told.
All right, well, that is Immortal Engines, and what was your final
C+.
grade?
Yeah,
C+.
sorry,
as
C+.
well. All right, it has a 28% on Rotten Tomatoes, pretty low, and I think
that's a little yeah.
It's looking like it's going to flop. It's made $22 million at the box office, but it cost reportedly between $100 and $150 million. So huge production, and I think with so many other blockbusters coming out this week and next week and the week after, I really think this film's going to really struggle to find an audience. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, they should have just pushed it back, honestly, to probably the spring, like March or
like they
April,
did with like Alita Battle Angel was supposed to come out
I honestly
this
think.
month, and,
I mean, I applaud Universal for sticking to their guns and like we've picked this date and we're gonna go, but yeah, it seemed like they shot themselves in the foot big time here.
My father was a lighthouse keeper. My mother was a queen. But life has a way of bringing people together.
We could unite our worlds one day.
Check it out. Arthur is talking to the fish.
They made me what I am. Permission to come aboard.
All right. Well, I want to hear from you, Will, on another superhero film, since we talked about it earlier in the show. Aquaman. You managed to catch this. I actually am going to watch this right after we do this episode.
Nice.
So I haven't quite seen it yet, but I'm very curious based on what I've heard. But what is Aquaman, and why should people care about it?
Sure. Aquaman is the DC character. I think he's best known for talking to fish and wearing a yellow leotard.
It's a way to put it.
I don't know. There is this kind of reputation with Aquaman where he's like been like a joke for like 20, 30 years. I don't know. I mean, that's not to dismiss the character Aquaman. I think he's fine, but there is this kind of mentality of like Aquaman has been like kind of like the dorky, goody two-shoe character. And I think DC and their expanded universe that they're making have worked pretty hard to go for the, I guess, newer interpretation of the character where he's, I don't know if this was introduced in the 90s or 2000s.
Yeah, it was in the 90s, but they've also, I think in the 2000s, they did a New 52 in the comics where, they comment on that, and they really work hard to make Aquaman much more of a like devastating and powerful character who like can just wreak havoc. So obviously DC is well aware of this reputation.
Yeah, but no, so they have kind of made him like he's like long hair, scraggy, kind of like a hard drinking, party loving Aquaman. And I don't know if the purists are going to be against that, but for me personally, I think it's a fun interpretation of the character. And I think Jason Momoa does a good job with it. I think in other roles, he hasn't really gotten to show his charisma as much. In this role, I think he gets to show it pretty full on. And I think he's having a lot of fun with the role as well. And you see it, like, especially in this film, his standalone film, which is very much like DC Warner Brothers looking at Thor and just like, do that for the fish boy. And that's kind of how they're going about it. But I will say, I think it is benefited enormously by James Wan being the director here, because I don't know, between him and Sam Raimi, I don't know what it is about horror directors, or at least genre filmmakers, when they come into superhero projects, but I just think they work better as far as the live action is concerned. They seem to have like a lot of the pulpiness intact, and I think they kind of are aware of like some things need to be taken seriously, but not everything needs to be taken seriously. And thankfully, this movie avoids some of the trappings of recent DC adaptations where they're very dragged down and serious. This is a movie where in the first 5 minutes, Nicole Kidman eats a goldfish out of a tank. And an octopus plays the drums at one point, and Dolph Lundgren is this kind of, I don't even know how to describe his character. He is very, I guess, stoic, but dressed in a manner that is not as much. But
and yet none of this made its way to the trailer.
No, it did not, unfortunately. He is actually pretty good in the film, too. But yeah, it's very, very campy is what I'm saying. It's a film that is well aware of how silly it can be and how silly it should be. And thankfully, I would say for at least like 45 minutes to an hour, the film relishes that campiness. Even though it's like a $200+ million production, it has that kind of like campy, silly vibe to it that I found really enjoyable. I think for the first act of this film, it's a full blast. It's just very, very entertaining. But unfortunately, this is about a 90-minute or 105-minute film that is, I believe, 143 minutes long. Whew. And that's I'm sorry. Like, I think even the biggest Aquaman fans are going to be like, that's too much Aquaman for one movie. It's weird because I think they knew that given the recent state of DC, that this might be the only Aquaman movie we're ever going to get. And they're like, just put as much in here. This is our one shot. Let's just go for it. And I can applaud that, but I will say that like after a point, it just got so boggled down and bloated. I apologize for all the water puns I'm going to make, but yeah, it just kind of, it felt overblown in a way that I found myself just kind of exhausted after a point. And that's a shame because I was just so enjoying the first half of this film that the second half being kind of dragged down. I was just disappointed that the second half didn't quite live up to the first as far as enjoyment value. But overall, I think it's going to be better than some people anticipate, if maybe not quite as good as it could have been. But as it stands, I think it's pretty fun. It's a nice little surprise for the end of the year. And John, I hope you like it as well.
All right. Well, I'll know pretty soon whether or not I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. B- for me.
All right, a B- for Aquaman. It's better than I was expecting based on some of the production issues, and they kept delaying it, and it's Aquaman, and you want a superhero like this to have a great movie because it's so different and an underwater world, and all of those things should lead to an exciting and different kind of superhero movie. I'm a little sorry it's not closer to, I think, most good superhero films at least can get up to B+, and I think that's the mark of a pretty decent flick. But B-, not bad. So I'll definitely let you know what I think of this one pretty soon. Before I get into my review of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 2, I want to hear from you, Will, very quickly. You did manage to see The Favorite, which we already talked about last week. I don't think you've seen Roma yet. But do you want to tell our listeners what you thought of The Favorite just very quickly?
Sure. I liked it quite a bit. I was telling you, it did feel a little bit to me like Yorgos Lanthimos for beginners, in the sense that I feel like if you have liked his other films, or at least have appreciated them, but haven't quite been able to love them for one reason or another, maybe they're a little too dark, a little too dry, a little too, I guess,
as
maybe
good writing-wise, maybe?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'll get to that in a bit, but I think his writing is actually very good. I just think people don't really appreciate the style in which it's presented. But I enjoyed the film quite a bit. I would say I didn't like it quite as much as his last two films, which were The Killing of a Sacred Deer and The Lobster. But I did enjoy it quite a bit. I gave it a B+. And but I will say, as good as the script is, I felt like there were certainly jokes in the film where, like, I think they didn't click quite as well compared to like when he's working on his own scripts, where like the humor is very much matched with his directing style. And I think those like jokes hit a lot harder. This film didn't pack the same punch for me. I guess maybe there's also the fact that it wasn't quite as unpredictable as other films can be. I don't think it's like full max Yorgos Lanthimos, but I think it's a good beginning for a lot of people if they wanted to check out his stuff. And I think it's going to certainly be more accessible than The Killing of a Sacred Deer, even though I felt that film was a little stronger.
Yeah, and definitely probably more star power in this case. Yeah,
and the performances also are all tremendous, especially from Olivia Colman and Emma Stone.
Yes, I'm still rooting for Olivia Colman to win Best Actress. I think we disagree a little bit. I think she is the lead, but I think you think it's Emma Stone.
Well, I mean, there's no traditional lead. I mean, you could argue that they're all leads, but I think if the film has a lead, it's Emma Stone because she has the arc of the story.
An argument for another day. I do think, though, it is funny because obviously, if you listen to last week's episode, I liked The Favorite a little bit more than you did. It's one of my favorites of the year. And I do think there's a lot to be said about how much you like the writing of Yorgos Lanthimos. That really determines what you think of The Favorite because he didn't write this one. But he did direct it, and I really love his direction and style. So it is interesting to see that The Favorite, you really can draw lines between who's going to like it more than other people, which is... You can't usually boil film subjectivity to a science like that. It still isn't, but it's about the closest I think you can get to sort of figuring out what you're going to like in this case. But okay, The Favorite. Glad you're able to check it out. And then are you going to be able to see Roma anytime soon? It's on Netflix right now.
I really, really hope so. It's finally playing in theaters near my area. I just got to figure out a time and a date where I can check it out, but it's definitely on my radar for sure.
1 year ago, my old life ended and my new life began.
The greatest star.
I want to be successful.
I am by far.
But I haven't told my friends or my parents.
But no one knows it.
Except my ex. He knows. And you. We're partners. You're great at what you do.
Alone, I am a spittoon. With you, I'm a somebody.
I'm going to talk briefly about The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 2. I talked about Season 1 last year, I think, on this show. I don't remember if I talked about it with you.
Yeah, Jumanji episode you talked about.
Ah, you remember the exact episode. I'm impressed.
That's just because I have thoroughly scavenged our Jumanji episode. If you don't know, Jumanji on YouTube, our episode for that is like insanely high.
I think
way higher than it should be.
Has it hit the millions yet? I think
it's well past
close.
a million. I think it might even be closer to 2 million by now.
Oh no.
I think I have thoroughly investigated this episode. Like, what is it about this one that cracked the mold?
We just did something to really click with listeners, I guess.
But yeah, that's how I remember. It has 1.7 million views.
Well, there's going to be a new Jumanji film next holiday, so hopefully that episode will be just as much of a splash. But anyway, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I recommend. Go ahead.
That splash pun. That's the one I didn't get to make in Aquaman. My mini.
Yes. Well, we don't know if it's going to have that much. I mean, it is making a lot of money. Not to overlap a little bit. I think it's already made back its budget and hasn't even released in its
States. That's good. Yeah. So Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 2. I'm very excited about this. Tell me all about it.
That's right. Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I loved this first season. This is an Amazon Video show. I can't wait for you to see the second season, Will Ashton, because I think it improves upon the first. All of my complaints about the first season where I didn't like some of the meandering with her. Is she going to be a comic? And all of that. The big question in this one, of course, Rachel Brosnahan comes back. Big question for her is, she's more of a struggling comic in the second season. How is she going to break this news to her family? How is she going to be able to juggle being a mother, being a divorcee, she has a variety of jobs in the second season. And as the second season starts, it sort of gets into a rhythm where you're like, okay, this is what the show is now. It's her kind of going from club to club, and of course, Alex Borstein comes back. She plays Susie again. And it's really about, this show in a lot of ways, at its core, is about their friendship. And I think that's what really makes the second season work. If it had to, clutch onto any sort of dynamic or any sort of point or message, I think it is those two characters. I think they're the key. Obviously, it's a wonderful cast of characters. Her parents continue to be just really the sneak stealth MVPs of this show.
Oh yeah.
As always, they are just impossible not to love. Marin Hinkle and Tony Shalhoub, of course, play her parents. And Midge, I don't know if you might have said her character's name is Midge Maisel, and she comes from such an electric family and such a crazy background. And I love that the second season gets into this even more. One thing that I do think people might complain about, and one of the main criticisms I've seen for the show, and I kind of understand, is the show's treatment of Joel. Joel is her ex-husband. In the first season, he really is a monster of a character, does something absolutely reprehensible, which kicks off the entire series. And in the second season, they really, really do a deep dive into who he is, how he's dealing with, you know, being divorced, and there's a lot of time spent on this character. And I can see a lot of people watching the show really hating his scenes and hating his involvement in the show and wishing that he wasn't part of it anymore. I'm not quite as decided on how I feel about him. It really goes back and forth. And at times I feel like Midge herself, where I really wonder, I should hate this person, but at times I kind of like him, but I still do not forgive him for the things that he did in the first season. But one of the things that I do credit the show with is that it portrays these characters as people, as comedic and over the top as it is. There are like really well-drawn characters here. And even the characters you hate, you find yourself sympathizing with from time to time, not always. I think that you're going to have a marvelous time with the season 2. And there is a stretch of this season that takes place in the Catskills that is a direct nod to Dirty Dancing. And believe me when I say, Will Ashton, they're 4 of my favorite episodes of any series ever.
Wow.
I absolutely love this part of the show. It's hilarious. It's heartwarming. I watched a lot of this season on a plane in between San Francisco and New York, and you know, it was a red eye, Will Ashton. People are trying to sleep. And here I am cackling in my seat because the show is so funny that I can't contain it. I think it says more about me than it does the show, honestly. But yeah, this show was made for people like me who love stand-up comedy, who love the stories that you can tell in those ways. They do so many great things with characters from the first season. Lenny Bruce has such a great arc in this season that really foreshadows a lot of things that happen to the person in real life that I absolutely love, that they go to dark places. They go to places that you said it kind of before in an earlier review, but, you know, plays it seriously when it needs to be serious, but also has some laughs when you need to have some laughs. And I think that, you know, I don't think Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is made by a horror director. Although I forgot to say that one thing I do love about horror directors, which is a bit of an aside, is I think that there is this like mentality that like a filmmaker should do horror like when they first start. It's a great genre to start out in. So I think you can find like a lot of like great directors who make things that have nothing to do with horror got their start maybe in a couple of indie projects that were horror based. So just want to put that out there. I think that that's if there are any budding filmmakers listening to this show, that's my piece of advice. I think we've seen a lot of like great filmmakers come out of that background. So if you have a passion for filmmaking, make a horror film, get it done and do it. I saw a tweet actually from somebody who was saying something along those lines of, if you just need to make a film, make a horror film, and the rest will kind of fall into place. So anyway, that's
sound advice from renowned filmmaker John Negroni about
who's made no films but has written books, which are much easier to do than films.
Oh, wow.
In my opinion, I'm just sort of assuming, but anyway,
I'm not going to assume one way or the other about that.
That's The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 2. I hope you check it out soon, Will Ashton. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, I'm very excited to check it out.
All right. Next, Will, you have just a couple of things, and then we're going to call it a show. But what's this first one? Is this another Deadpool movie? Are you joking?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's Once Upon a Deadpool, which is the PG-13 version of Deadpool 2. We already reviewed Deadpool 2, so I think you know how John and I feel about that film.
Not great.
But yeah, I think I gave it a B- at the time. It's acceptable, but I think it's exhausting compared to the first. It just feels a little bit too much for me. But as far as this version is concerned, it's about the same length. They're about a little under 2 hours each. The only main difference with this is that all the F-bombs are taken out or bleeped. The nudity is taken out. All the sexual talk is dubbed over or ADR'd out or cut out completely. All the blood's taken out, but a lot of the violence is still in there. It's just without the blood spots, which is interesting. I'll get back to that in a little bit. But yeah, the main difference here is that they had some scenes with Fred Savage where they're kind of poking fun at his scene in The Princess Bride, where he is like kind of kidnapped by Deadpool to hear the story of Deadpool 2 and his PG-13 version. And those scenes, they're fine. But that's really where I kind of go with this version. It's just okay. Like it just feels very kind of nakedly cynical to me in a way that's like, well, Fox is going around, like they're kind of pacing around their office like, well, we can't release Alita, this is going to bomb, but we have this release date. What are we going to do about it? And then they're just like, why don't we just do Deadpool again, but we'll make it PG-13, so it's like a gimmick, and we'll make meta jokes about it. And they're like, that works. Ryan Reynolds, will you do it? And to his credit, he said he'd only do it if they gave a portion of the profits to charity. So part of the profits, if you buy a ticket for the film, they go to the renamed Fudge Cancer. So if you do see the film, that's something good that comes about it. But as it stands, I don't really have much to say about it. I'd give this version of it a C+, just because I found myself pretty bored and exhausted about it, and I think it kind of extenuates a lot of the problems that I had with Deadpool 2, and made me realize that it's probably a weaker film than I originally gave it credit for, and maybe closer to how you felt about it, John. So that's about it as far as where I'm concerned with Once Upon a Deadpool.
Okay, I'm sad to hear that. The big reason why I had no interest in this as well, I think because it's PG-13, if you're younger, or you want to take somebody who's younger and you don't want to expose them to R-rated content that's considered R-rated by a group of people who are nebulous at best, then I guess this is for you.
Yes. Well, actually, I teased this, but one last thing about Deadpool. I will say it is a pretty interesting, if you want to look at the dive into like what the MPAA considers PG-13 appropriate or R-rated appropriate.
I was going to mention that, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, that's my last thing about Deadpool.
Lucy, you're looking a wee bit puffy at the moment.
What? The bags under your eyes are starting to dominate.
Now, a town like this tends to lend itself to an overactive imagination. Why are we settling for such blatant banality?
I like it. What do you think?
I think it's sensational. Join me in starting a new existence within ourselves. Come on, huh? Who's with me?
You gobshite.
Well, you're lost.
I do want to talk about another film, which I have a lot higher opinion on, which is The Party's Just Beginning, which is the directorial debut and screenwriting debut of actress Cara Gillian, who also stars in the film. This is a passion project. I know she's been wanting to make this, I think, at least for the last couple of years, I believe. It's a film that she's been writing for a while. I know in interviews I've heard her talk about it. And I believe based on her notoriety with Doctor Who and now with the Marvel films and with Jumanji, which we mentioned earlier, she is finally able to make this passion project of hers, which is it's definitely not, I think, what some people will expect from Karen Gillian, given that she does a lot of stuff in like sci-fi and fantasy and comedy. This is very much, it's selling itself as kind of a dark comedy, but it's mostly just a drama about this girl who she's 24, living in the heart of Scotland, more of the suburbs of Scotland, actually. And it's coming up on the 1-year anniversary of her friend committing suicide. And the film is talking a lot about the high rates of suicide in Scotland and how she's kind of dealing with the trauma and coming to terms with what happened. And now that this anniversary is coming up, the film bounces a lot between the past and the present and exploring kind of her mental state. And it's very much a character study guided by Karen Gillian. She is in the lead performance as well. And it's, I gotta say, I mean, it's not perfect. I think it definitely has some problems, I think mainly from a screenwriting standpoint.
Which she wrote the film, didn't she?
Right, yeah, sorry. She wrote the film as well. But as far as the directorial debut is concerned, I think she does a really good job. I think it's a very strong debut, and I also think it's one of her best performances to date.
Wow.
I think it's clear that she's been sitting on this project for a while, in the sense that you can tell she really knows this character. She really understands what she wants to communicate with this character. And I think all the scenes with her work really, really well. And I think she has a lot of unique style choices here that I didn't expect as far as her filmmaking is concerned. And it is a very visually appealing film as far as how it's presented. And even though it is very much based on like kind of a dreary, quirky look at Scotland, there is something kind of like melancholy beautiful about the film as far as how it's presented. I think it's more the supporting characters that don't quite work as well as they should. So Lee Pace is also in the film, and they have kind of like a meet cute relationship that feels, in my opinion, a little cliched. It's like that whole like they don't want to give each other their names kind of thing, which it's fine, it's cute, but it's kind of been done before. And there's another character so in the film they have this whole thing where the house that she lives in, she lives with her parents at the moment, and their phone number is like one number off from like a suicide hotline. So they get like a lot of these like random like colors, and that's kind of leading to the film's dark humor, I suppose. But there's this one person who keeps calling back, and they form like kind of like this old guy who sounds a lot like Mrs. Doubtfire, which is a little odd for me at first. But no, they have, it's really it's like, hello, dear. Oh, look at that. It's very. It took me a while to get used to that, but it's one of those things where I think you've talked about this before, John. It's a lot of stuff that's communicated in these scenes is already communicated better, I think, visually in other scenes, and I feel like they kind of like have her explaining her state in a way that's kind of like telling instead of showing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where,
and
like,
I'm not going to let you get away with mentioning Lee Pace and not note it, the connection for Guardians of the Galaxy thing.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, that's how they... she met Lee Pace working on Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's how they came...
Right. She was Nebula, he was the main villain in that, Ronan.
Yeah. But I think what might garner more criticisms than anything else, I'm apologizing for focusing more on the negative stuff, I didn't mean to, but the character of Alistair...
So, yeah.
Yeah, sure. The character of Alistair, I don't think I'm any authority to talk about this, but there has been some criticisms from the LGBT community as far as how the character is portrayed. I would invite you to read more criticism about that from there, because I think they would say a lot better than I would, but I can say that I can certainly understand why they're critical of the character. I don't think the way that the character is presented in the film is as effectively told as it could be. That's probably not the best way to say it, but there's definitely valid criticisms to be made about the character, and I'm kind of walking eggshells there because it's a little bit spoilery as far as what I'm talking about. But as it stands, though, I think as a film, especially as a directorial debut, very solid. I really enjoyed it. It's funny, it's sad, it's very personal and heartfelt. You could feel the energy and life in this film that Karen Gillan is giving in. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where she is going to go next as a filmmaker. Speaking on an earlier point that you were talking about, John, her next film is reportedly going to be a horror film. And as far as the directing career is concerned. And I will say, like, the way she uses sound also as in the film, especially one scene in particular involving a hanging, not related to the main suicide of the film, is really, really effective. And it just shows, like, oh yeah, she definitely knows what she's doing here, and I'm really excited to see where she blooms as a filmmaker. And so I gave it a B. I was between a B- and a B, but I think the strong suits of the film really worked out, and there's a lot in here that connected to me on a personal level that was affecting. So I would definitely recommend it.
Are people going to be able to check this out in theaters, or?
Well, it's in theaters now, and it's also available. I believe it's now available on VOD as well.
Right. So this is Orchard. So yeah, this very much feels to me like a film that I'll probably be watching while I cook breakfast or something like that kind of indie feel. My only question is,
might be a sad breakfast.
Yes, well, I do. I like to have sad breakfasts. I've watched a lot of sad indie films while preparing meals. But Will Ashton, for this film, do they explain why it used to be called Tupperware Party? Because that was the original name, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was trying to remember what the original title was. Kinda. There is a Tupperware Party. I don't know why that would be. I mean, like, kind of makes sense, I guess. But
who are we to question the creative decisions behind the naming of this film? I guess.
No, I mean, I could see that being intentionally misconstruing, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like something her mom puts on at one point, but it's closer towards the end of the film, so I can't really talk about it too much. But I don't think that title would have fit quite as well.
Well, that is Party's Just Beginning. Like you said, it is in theaters now, and it sounds like it's worth seeking out if you're looking for a sad indie film.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you're a fan of hers, definitely. I also think if you're looking for a good film for 52 films by women, it's definitely worth checking out. I know Sam Nolan actually checked this film out as well recently. He had a lot of high praise to give it as well. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Next week, we are going to be talking about Aquaman in more detail. We're also going to be talking about Bumblebee. The current plan is, because Mary Poppins Returns is also going to be coming out, we're hoping to do a special bonus episode of the show that just covers Mary Poppins Returns. We know there are a lot of films coming, and we're not exactly sure which ones you want to hear the most, so we're going to try to do all of them. Maybe even Welcome to Marwen, which is also hitting its release. And Second Act, American Renegades, All True, and Cold War are other films coming out, but I don't think we're going to find time for them.
Isn't Marwen coming out on Christmas?
Marwen has a limited release on the 21st. So we might actually wait until the 25th because it is going to have a bigger one. But it's going to open in the US, on the 21st.
I see.
So yeah, that is everything that's on our radar for the next week. But I think that'll do it for this week's episode of Cinemaholics. Don't forget, you can find all of the links to our social pages. You can email us. Our email, everything is in our show notes. You can email us anytime at cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. Leave us a review on the podcast directory of your choice to help support the show. And go to our Patreon, patreon.com/cinemaholics, to become a supporter and to enter our holiday giveaway. With that, from the Internet California, I am John Agroni.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
From Maverick Hines and Matt Serafini, we'll see you next time.